Good morning. Good morning, Latin America. Good afternoon, Africa. Good evening, Asia. And good night, Pacific. Well, hello to all of you who are listening. My name is Mattia Paia Galletti. I am the lead technical specialist working for IFAD, responsible for Indigenous Peoples and Tribal Affairs. Today, I will be your moderator for a very interesting session. Today, we are going to talk about two very important topics: biodiversity, and agroecology. We are going to listen to a number of speakers. I will introduce them very quickly to you. We will have 1 hour and a half time. We scheduled this session with a series of presentation and a series of dialogue with the objective, well, we have two objectives, in fact. The first one is to have the opportunity to show you IFAD's work, in particular with regards to biodiversity, the preparation of a new strategy on biodiversity, on which it's very important to listen to the inputs, perspectives, views, comments, suggestions of indigenous people. And the second objective is to understand how agroecology is relevant to indigenous peoples, and to learn from some examples about their practices. And of course, to see how we can work together. So it's going to be very, very interesting. So quickly, let me tell you who will be the main guest speakers. The first one is Melissa Nelson, who is from the Anishinaabe people. She's an indigenous ecologist, writer, editor, media maker, scholar, activist. And she's professor of indigenous sustainability in the School of Sustainability of Arizona University. Next, we have Tuntiak Katan, that we hope he will be able to connect. He's from the Shua people. He's also activist and general coordinator of the COICA, the Global Alliance of Territorial Communities, based in Ecuador. Then we have Abera Ogato, who is from Gamo people. He's the coordinator of the Dere Integrated Development Action from Ethiopia. He's a coordinator of a very successful IPAF-funded project. IPAF is the Indigenous People Assistance Facility. The project is improving the livelihood of women in Southwest Ethiopia who depend on NSET crop. Then we have from the Philippines, George Astudillo. He's from the Kankanay people, and he's coordinator of the IFAD-funded project of Charm in northern Mindanao. And finally, we will have Iris Tavares, who is the coordinator of the IFAD-funded project Paulo Freire from Brazil. Now, without further ado, because time will be a challenge, because we have many speakers, all of them know what is the time allocation. Let me, with the pleasure and honor, give the floor to my most distinguished colleague, Rique Gran Oliveira, who is a senior global technical specialist looking at natural resource management. And Rique will give us a presentation regarding the work of IFAD on agroecology with indigenous peoples. Over to you, Rique.
Thank you, Mattia. Good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So the last year we have in IFAD been taking stock on what are we actually doing on agroecology. And that study we would like to present to you the main findings. And it has been Doina, who is here with us today, who has been working on the stock take. So she will do the presentation of the main results. And then in the end, I will say something about an example of one of the projects in the stock take. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Doina.
Thank you very much, Rique. Thank you, Mattia. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I will start sharing my screen. And okay, so first, let me give a little bit of background around IFAD support to agroecology. which is the application of ecological principles to agriculture while taking into account the scientific, social, and economic aspects within food systems, empowering those who apply it, including women, youth, and indigenous peoples, pastoralists, fisherfolks, and rural workers. Back in 2018, the multi-agency Scaling Up Agroecology initiative led by FAO was launched in order to support knowledge and innovations for local problems, to identify and support policy processes for the transformation of food and agricultural systems, and building partnerships integrating agroecology into the United Nations systems for the Sustainable Development Goals. Under this process, participating agencies were asked to first identify agroecology-related interventions within their portfolios. Therefore, by applying a specific methodology, IFAD conducted its own stocktake by reviewing 2,207 projects that completed or need to be completed between the 2018 and 2023 period. First results showed us that falling into 4 categories, 13% of IFAD projects are directly supporting agroecology, while another 47% are partially supporting it, making for a total of 60% of projects related to agroecology. We have also seen that the remaining 40% of projects not related to agroecology, 17% of them do not invest in agricultural production at all. Another interesting result of our stocktake is that agroecology-based projects are fully adopting the 4 IFAD mainstreaming priorities, which are gender, nutrition, youth, and climate change. While all project types, including the non-agroecological ones, do support gender, 92% of agroecology-based projects support nutrition, and 96% of them support climate change, whereas non-agroecology projects are far behind at 20% for nutrition and 18% for climate change. Importantly, IFAD projects involving indigenous peoples are more likely to support agroecological activities, and similar percentages can be observed for youth, as young people are more involved when a project is using an agroecological approach. Finally, agroecology is strongly supporting biodiversity through activities on diversification and integration of sectors, on community pasture and fodder management, community forest, woodland management, and community and local seed systems. Particularly on this last one, as you can notice, there is certainly opportunity for doing more, and as supporting community and local seed systems is crucial for biodiversity. Thank you, and now I will give the floor to Rike.
Thank you, Doina. So this last slide, as part of the stocktake, is kind of breaking down the levels wherein we were analyzing what are we actually doing in agroecology. So we are kind of saying agroecology has a series of type of activities at the farm level, at the landscape level, but also in the way that the farmers approach markets. More innovative way, connecting closer to consumers and producers together, and also trying to find these more values around food that goes with agroecology and be more, what can we say, have a lot more impact on the local food systems. The 4th level that we were looking at is how are the projects supporting to improve the services at the policy level, but also the provision of services to boost the transition to agroecology. So this was the 4th level we were looking at. And as you can see here, while our projects are quite good at investing at the practices at farm level, but also at landscape level in general, we have problems when it comes to capturing these more innovative ways of moving or using the agroecology to connect to markets. And when it comes to policies and provision of the services, we are doing even less. So these are areas that we really would like to work more on, of course, with our beneficiaries, with our partners, to see how we can improve so we can support the transition to agroecology and sustainable food systems. So now, next slide, please. I think I'm quickly running out of time, but I just wanted to mention this project because it's quite interesting and it's a little bit different from what all our distinct panel members will be presenting. So this is a project in Butana area in Sudan. You can see it here where it's placed on the map, the orange part. And that was a project that tried to use different agroecology approaches to work on the issue of the droughts that is really impacting the people in this area because this is semi-desert. And because of the climate change, and also because of the restrictions, more and more restrictions in movement of the pastoralist people, it's becoming more and more difficult. At the end of the project has already finalized, so we can say a little bit about the impacts that it did reach 63,000 people, and they were spread, or households actually, so even more people, and they were spread in 378 communities. So it was a project with pastoralist communities and agro-pastoralist communities. 80% of the population that had been participating in the project said afterwards, at the end of the project, that they would no longer self-categorize themselves as poor. So that is quite interesting. And also leaving to the people how to classify what is poverty, which I think is a quite interesting approach the project also had. Next slide, please. So one of the very innovative things the project did was to work with the communities to actually work together in networks. So the project started out with communities that had their lands along what in Sudan they call them the wadis. Throughout the Middle East we can find this word, which are these seasonal rivers in the desert areas. So 6 communities were brought together, but by itself, because of the strength they gathered by working together from each community, and then having, you can see here, the structure was quite sophisticated that they set up. They built a whole governance structure of how to work together on a common vision for all this land that were now a lot bigger than just the individual community land. So they could really manage this area and also manage the natural resources. So they used this collaboration to improve and work on the management of forest reserves, but also rangeland reserves. And they took advantage of a new space that was opened in the law, where communities can actually register this land as community land, so they could get land tenure security for it. So this was quite an important achievement that they did. And these 6 villages then grew by itself to 26. So now in this case of the TASAP network, there are actually 26 communities working together, and quite impressive what they are achieving, way beyond what the project has offered. And we have 18 other networks also working this way throughout Butana after the project. Next slide, please. So the other thing, so this is an example of one of the projects that actually did manage to work on the more policy level, using this agroecology approach with high levels of participation and empowerment. So since the communities have now built their own way of working together on natural resources management, managing a lot bigger territories than they did individually before, they had also got empowered to play a lot bigger role in advocacy for what they wanted to see, also at the community or the municipality level, localities as they call them, and also at the state level. So the Butana area covers 5 states within Sudan, so it's quite complicated to get them to work together. So the project supported this process of forums, working from what the communities had gained on the network level, and then pushing the issues that they couldn't solve by themselves upwards towards the different institutions and levels that needs to take care of them. And in the end, it ended out with that we managed to design a framework for the management of Butana, so a framework for the natural resource management of Butana, which is a quite high achievement on policies, which included an agreement between all the 5 states, and even in that sense, the federal level. Now we need to implement it in the next project to come in Sudan, so that's going to be extremely interesting. I think I will stop there, not to take too much time, even though there's other interesting features of this project. But let's move on to the next, because I can see my time is already up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Doina. Thank you, Rike. By the way, I didn't introduce Doina. Doina is our great consultant on agroecology. So sorry, Doina, for that. But thank you for the presentation that, first of all, has revealed that, well, 60% of projects having to do with agroecology, I tell you, is something quite remarkable. I've been at IFAD for quite a number of years, and it took a while before the agroecology approach would, let's say, break the ice and enter into our operations. And of course, we need to do more. And it was also useful to see the areas where you have already identified the possibility and the potential to use more the agroecology approach to enter into issues related to access to markets and the policy dimension, even if the example provided on Sudan, I think, is a good one. So it's we are not starting from scratch. Also important and useful is to see so clearly the connection, the complementarity and synergies between agroecology and indigenous peoples, as well as agroecology and biodiversity. So very, very useful presentation. Thank you so much. Let's move on to the second presentation by René Ankvaryard, difficult name. Is our senior global technical specialist working on environmental management issues. And our presentation will focus on the work that we already started in the preparation of a new strategy on biodiversity. Over to you, René.
Thank you, Mattia, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. I'm IFAD focal point for biodiversity, and therefore really happy to be able to tell you that we are developing IFAD's first biodiversity strategy. And I will explain a bit why we're doing this and what we would like to achieve. So I will share my screen. Whoops. Let's see, sorry. Okay, there we are. Now there. Okay, so we know already from the 5th edition of the Global Biodiversity Outlook that none of the Biodiversity Convention's Aichi targets that were decided a decade ago were fully met. And this is even threatening the achievement of multiple sustainable development goals. There is progress, but not to the extent we hoped. We also know the role agriculture plays in biodiversity loss, mainly through land conversions and the focus on very few species in food production. Now there's a very strong momentum for renewed efforts in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and IFAD is very much part of this work. The interest in biodiversity was also shown in the preparation for the IFAD 12 replenishment for the period 2022 to 24, and we received so many questions from member states and donors on what IFAD does to enhance biodiversity and how much we invest in it. So we realized that we had not been very good at communicating what we do to promote biodiversity and quantifying it, and not been systematic enough in our approach to biodiversity, meaning that we might have lost some opportunities here. So with the strategy, we would like to better capture the benefits from biodiversity that we do. And in working with enhancing livelihoods and resilience for small-scale farmers, we do indeed have also benefits for biodiversity. And this can be through, for example, restoration of ecosystems such as mangroves that serve to protect against coastal erosion, but also serve as protection and breeding grounds for fish, for example. It can also be through agrobiodiversity for improved nutrition and health. And many of the agroecological approaches that was mentioned in the previous presentation and used in IFAD's projects also have many benefits for biodiversity. We need to work more systematically with biodiversity in the design of projects and programs. in order to be able to make the best decisions possible for both people and nature. And to be able to do so, we also need to raise awareness and knowledge on methods and practices that can be used to encompass those needs. Agrobiodiversity is important to IFAD because we see very strong links to both nutrition and resilience of rural people. Over the span of history, some 7,000 crops have been cultivated for food, but now only like 90% of our calories only come from 100 or so species, of which rice, maize, potatoes, and wheat make up 60%. And this reliance on very few species is very risky, especially in the face of climate change. So IFAD is therefore working with neglected and underutilized species and also diversification on farm level, for example. And in improving our methods for capturing and the benefits and follow-up of biodiversity, we hope also to become much better equipped to contribute and expanding the knowledge base and to be able to develop more sustainable agricultural practices. A first step in the strategy process, we had a closer look at our own portfolio to get an overview of how biodiversity is currently being approached within IFAD and to get some insights into what challenges and opportunities there are in integrating biodiversity into projects. And the biodiversity stocktake that was done last year by Mena, who will come in later in this session. This was done and it was partly building on the agroecological stocktake that was just presented to you. But we focused on the 66 projects with current completion dates between 2020 and 2021, so that enough documented results were available for the analysis. And some of the conclusions from this stocktake was that we found a significant connection between IFAD's mainstreaming themes, which are environment and climate change, nutrition, youth, and gender. They were strongly connected to biodiversity, as well as with indigenous peoples. So we saw that biodiversity is particularly linked to projects that are climate change sensitive, involve indigenous peoples, and promote nutrition resilience. Another thing that came out quite strongly in the stocktake is that the majority of biodiversity related projects do apply community management approaches. Then agrobiodiversity, the use of traditional knowledge and local seed and animal breed systems are present, but to a bit lesser extent. Looking at the challenges faced then, here in the figure you see the main types of challenges faced. Many of them are the usual things that you encounter when you implement projects. Those that are specifically linked to biodiversity, I would say, is a lack of understanding of the benefits to biodiversity for enhancing livelihoods. And this can lead to governments not prioritizing biodiversity and therefore not willing to invest anything in it. And this is also linked to the challenge that much of the benefits of biodiversity are not often tangible, and evidence that promoting biodiversity can be economically viable is definitely needed. We also see a very strong dependence on specific grants where biodiversity was implemented. The next figure shows some of the factors of success. Some of them have been mentioned, of course, and it's really crucial to have the support of governments and the recognition and prioritization of biodiversity. And I think this also highlights the importance of engaging in policy dialogue and awareness raising. Of course, technical expertise and knowledge is necessary to be able to promote these issues, and also to make visible the benefits of promoting. And community management plans and engagement is very crucial for because of the strong link to ensure the ownership of the projects. Last slide, I see my time is running up. I just wanted to mention some of the steps forward. we definitely need to build the evidence to support us in building the business case for biodiversity in IFAD and how we can convince countries to invest in this. So here we would like to explore win-win opportunities in how to benefit the different needs of conservation and people's needs. And we also need to find good methods for measuring and estimate value of these resources. We know there's a lot of work that has been done in this area. We have the latest important edition in this Dasgupta review that was recently launched, which is a massive effort to show the economics of biodiversity. And we need to frame IFAD's approach and show and identify where IFAD's advantages are and where we can lead. A very important part of this process is the consultations with IFAD stakeholders such as yourself. And we would very much like to hear your thoughts on what direction IFAD should take when it comes to biodiversity inclusion. And what is your vision for biodiversity work within IFAD from your perspective? And there will be possible to raise your hands and put forward your good ideas and suggestions in the discussion later. And also, if you would like to share your ideas through the chat, that is also mostly welcome. And all these good ideas will feed directly into the strategy process. Thank you. Back to you, Mattia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Renée. And thank you also for keeping the time. I think it was another excellent presentation, showing once again the connection between biodiversity and indigenous peoples. We are strong, our projects are strong in biodiversities when they are connected with indigenous peoples. The stock taking has produced similar results. The stock taking with that we listened before with regard to agroecology, and this one regarding to biodiversity. So it's good that these two topics are going hand in hand. I think it's very important that you explain also what are the main challenges and the factors of success, in particular the involvement of governments, the fact that we need to engage with them, and also to build a business case to justify why it's important when we work on agriculture development, to think about objectives of biodiversity. And it's good that the preparation of the new strategy will have a strong consultation with the main stakeholders. And again, among the main stakeholders, indigenous peoples come up front, because we know that 6% of the global population, composed of 476 million indigenous peoples, is responsible, are the custodians of 80% of the world biodiversity. And that's why we are here. That's why we are here also with this event, to listen to the views and experience of indigenous peoples. Before that, we thought to have a little space for interaction and comments on the two presentations provided by IFAD before giving the primary role to our guest speakers. Let's see if there are any questions. If you have any questions, please raise your blue hand. We are all familiar with Zoom by now, or else you can write in the chat. I give you a few minutes, and say 1 minute. If not, we move on the agenda, because we will have another session where we can have a discussion. I don't see any blue hands, so let's move on to the next session, which is focusing on the indigenous perspectives on agroecology transition and biodiversity. And the first speaker is going to be Melissa Nelson. I introduced her before. Let me just repeat that at the moment she's professor of indigenous sustainability at Arizona University. So if you are ready, Melissa, I would give the floor to you. Over.
Thank you so much. Bujun and Dinwe Maganatug. Greetings to my relatives. I am zooming in from Coast Miwok territory, also known as Northern California, United States, Turtle Island. And I am proud and happy to be here with you this morning. So I will start sharing my Zoom presentation. Let's see here. So I'm very happy to speak with you today about Indigenous biodiversity and agroecology. And in terms of demonstrating biodiversity, Indigenous food is one of the best representations of the variety of plants and animals and mushrooms and minerals that we consume in our diets and use in our livelihoods on a daily basis. Full screen. This is an iconic image of seeds, the seeds of life, the seeds of our food, the seeds of our ancestors, the seeds of future generations. And seeds are the foundation of so much of our agroecology, whether they are cultivated seeds passed on through the generations for farming practices, or wild seeds gathered in grasslands and mountains in different ecosystems. So the land gives us so many seeds for our nutrition and our livelihood, our shelter. Ultimately, everything comes from Mother Earth. And of course, the rich biodiversity gives us such an incredible variety of the staple foods, the potatoes from the Andean peoples in South America, the maize, the corn from North America and Mesoamerica, Oaxaca area, the sunflower from North America, the chili peppers, the bean and corn varieties with our three sisters of Native American agriculture, corns, beans, and squash, represent a symbiosis, a model of integration and complementaritiness from nature that our human communities have demonstrated in solidarity and intertribal trade routes and kinship routes. And for us, it's not just about biodiversity, but it's about biocultural diversity. We know that our cultures would not exist without biodiversity, and yet our cultures are always impacting, affecting, and harmonizing with the natural world. So for Indigenous peoples, from my Anishinaabe worldview, you cannot separate land and people, or biological and cultural diversity. And this is the web of life that's demonstrated from a scientific perspectives with genes and species and habitats and ecosystems and landscapes and different territories, our ancestral lands, our sacred lands. From a cultural perspective, this is embodied in our languages. Languages are key to understanding biodiversity and the diversity of our languages and oral traditions, our cultural lifeways, our values and knowledges, our various practices and ways of being, sometimes also called the ethnosphere, all of the thoughts and memories and ideas that make up our rich cultural, intellectual traditions from Indigenous peoples. This slide here. And we are mapping, remapping ourselves in many different ways, and each Indian nation or Indigenous person has the right for self-determination to redefine your territory instead of having it defined for you by political colonial boundaries. And this was a fun process and project I participated in with Slow Food USA over a decade ago, looking at Turtle Island food sheds and really rethinking of our sense of place, our sense of territory, not by political boundaries, but by where our totem food systems come from. And so I'm speaking to you now from California, an Acorn Nation. I come from Bison Nation. My Chippewa or Anishinaabe people are up in the middle of North America, Bison and Moose Nation. That's the buffalo behind me here. And so for us, these are our teachers of biodiversity. These are our representatives of biodiversity. These are our officials of biodiversity, are these totem animal species and plant species that give us sustenance and give us life. And again, for us, you cannot separate humans and nature, whether you're in a wetland, you're in meadows, you're in forests, you're in grasslands. Here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have a lot of wetlands, and the rich tule plants that grow all around the freshwater ponds and lakes and rivers are very important. This tule is used to make everything from boats to houses to baskets. And I think this image also represents that we are completely embedded in the natural landscape, and biodiversity is our foundation of our culture, and that human health and environmental health are intimately integrated. Whatever we do to the land, we do to ourselves ultimately. So that connection for our health is very important. And again, we are not all farmers. Many different indigenous peoples are, pastoralists, traditional gatherers, harvesters, directly from the natural world and biodiversity. And we gather from our meadows, we gather from our forests, from grasslands, from many different habitats and ecosystems. And here we have an example of processing acorns, something that's done all over Turtle Island, North America, and all over the world where there's oak species. And to turn these nuts into nutritious, delicious food requires so much traditional ecological knowledge of the different species and the different chemical compositions of them, the tannins, how to process them, the manual practices, the dexterity of all of those intimate ways of relating to the oak trees and the acorns is part of our languages. It's encoded in our stories that are really important for teaching to the future generations. So it's important that there's intergenerational transmission of this knowledge from elders to youth, as these practices sadly get endangered from environmental pollution, encroachment into forest development that have limited the habitats, eroded the biodiversity, and sadly eroded the traditional knowledge as well. So we talk about tending the wild and the importance of indigenous agroecology that includes our traditional ecological knowledge systems, again, embedded in our languages, embedded in our ancestral and local landscapes. And these are not just quaint folkloric knowledges, they are scientific systems based on long-term observation and trial and error and experimentation. So we want really our knowledge to be acknowledged and elevated significantly, as opposed to being looked at as quaint folkloric knowledge. We do a lot of in situ tending and harvesting of our native species where they naturally grow. We maintain those habitats through many different practices of pruning and tending and coppicing and prescribed burns or traditional fire management to enhance the biodiversity, remove invasive species or pests. We also practice what's known as the honorable harvest, never taking more than you need, always returning something to practice reciprocity, always sharing your harvest with elders and youth and those who are unable to gather for themselves. We practice the ethic of seventh generation, the instruction that you always think of 7 generations in the future. Will they be able to gather these berries the way that we do today? Will they be able to gather those acorns, healthy acorns, to make their acorn bread for their rite of passage ceremony? So the importance of prayer and ceremony and what we often call religious or spiritual knowledge is also intimately related to this practice of indigenous agroecology. And of course, it's all about our youth and our children and honoring our local native food systems. Every day we eat the landscape. And how are we treating the landscape? What is the health of the landscape? What kind of contamination or pollution is happening there? So we often fight genetically modified organisms or pesticide use that we know is harmful to our plant and animal species, our relatives, and thus harmful to our own communities. And again, I spoke about the sacredness and importance of seeds that have been bred and cultivated by indigenous farmers for centuries and millennia. I'm lucky to work at 2 indigenous farms here in California where we cultivate heirloom seed varieties and work with a number of native farmers and seeds from the Ark of Taste from Slow Food. Here again, we're demonstrating the relationship between youth and elders and teaching that knowledge and continuing to practice on the land. Our biodiversity must be in our hands. It must be tangible. As previous speakers said, it can't be an abstract concept. Biodiversity, we are the evidence of the biodiversity. Our foods are the evidence of our biodiversity. And the role of community and solidarity and building up together, the exchange of knowledge is critical to this movement. Again, we honor corn as a very sacred relative to many of the indigenous peoples of Latin America that binds us together as a people and honor its power for fertility and health and well-being. Moving on, we also honor our fish relatives from the rivers and the oceans and the creeks and the lakes and the ponds, the biodiversity of our rich fish species that are sadly terribly endangered from dams and water pollution, so many impacts of quote, development or economic activity. This is a traditional fisherman from the Nuu-chah-nulth people, a dear elder friend from the west coast of Canada, doing a traditional salmon fire teaching process. So remembering and learning and teaching how to continue to cook in a traditional way is also very important. And this is some beautiful smoked salmon that was the result of this. So cooking and chefs and cuisine is also a big part of our agroecology and getting this food to market for economic well-being. Again, one of my totem animals is the great bison, the buffalo. There's a big effort to return the buffalo to our native lands in Turtle Island here. There's a buffalo treaty that over a dozen tribes have signed to reenact an intertribal trade of buffalo and bison so they can again roam freely across their vast territory. The buffalo are a symbol of resilience for Native Americans. They're also a source of food and shelter and clothing for us.
Sorry, Melissa, just for the time.
Yep, great. I'm just going to move on here. Again, agroecology has to be demonstrated with our youth, even in urban landscapes, that biodiversity is all around us. And also to bring in modern technology. Media is a great way of documenting these traditions for Native elders and youth. And also, we couldn't do this work without our international alliance building that I think IFAD and Slow Food has been so great. UN has been so great in encouraging these kinds of international intertribal exchanges. Here's some examples of that from the Slow Food Turtle Island Association. And also end with a quote here. There is renewal because that is what the seed asks of us with their own songs. When we listen to their small bundles of creation, the future rising from the ground and climbing out. And with that, I will close. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you. Chimigwech Nijikwe.
Thank you so much, Melissa. It was really fantastic. Very comprehensive presentation. In fact, I lost a little bit control of time because I was just beautifully lost in your pictures and your speaking. I think.
Sorry for going over time, but thank you so much.
I don't think anybody will complain. That's only my job, hard job, to look at time management as well. No, just quickly, a couple of points among the several points that you made, which I think are extremely important. As you know, this event is in between an Indigenous Peoples Forum. The main theme is the value of indigenous food systems. The idea is to be able to take forward to the World Food System Summit that will take place this year, the reasons of why indigenous food systems should be acknowledged, should be supported, should be promoted. And when you mention about the concept of the traditional ecological knowledge and the importance and the challenge to take this knowledge and consider this knowledge as scientific knowledge, is indeed one of the issues that is being discussed. Otherwise, there is always a kind of distance. Thinking about this knowledge is folkloristic, is not up to the standard of what a scientific knowledge should be. So this is a very important concept. And also the other point that you made so clearly is the connection. Everything starts from Mother Earth, and the connection between Mother Earth, the seas, the livelihood opportunities is there. And when you talk about biocultural diversity, that was music to our ears. And in fact, I don't know whether our colleagues, even if formally we are supposed to prepare a new strategy on biodiversity, we can sneak in this important addition. After all, is the connection between the biosphere and the ethnosphere that you mentioned, which is really very, very important. Once again, thank you so much. It was such a rich presentation. Moving on, let's start looking at some case studies, concrete experiences, additional concrete experiences. The first one is from Abera Ogato. Abera, I listened to Abera a couple of years ago. We were in Nairobi, and I remember his passionate description of his project. I have high expectations that you will be in love with the presentation once again. If Abera, you're right, I would give you the floor. If you are ready.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mattia. My picture is not coming. Sorry, I'm joining with my phone because I'm away from areas that I get connection with the Wi-Fi.
Okay, no problem. We can listen to you.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon.
We can show the presentation on your behalf.
Okay.
But the sound is not
on this slide
so clear.
Do you hear me?
Now we can see you. But
so
the,
can you...
the line is breaking. Let's just a second. Let me seek technical advice. 1 second.
So
okay, first of all, Abera, you can switch off the video. Just be connected on the sound. And perhaps we will hear you better. Can you try and speak now, please?
To you?
No.
What's coming to you?
Still no good. Then the next suggestion is to reconnect. If you can switch off and call again. And in the meantime,
Okay.
we move on to the next presentation. So no rush, take your time. And perhaps let's hope that when you call us back, the line will be better. Okay. Just let's move on to the next speaker. This is Iris. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. This is Iris Tavares. She's the coordinator of the IFAD-funded project in Brazil, project named after Paulo Freire. And Iris, good, I can see you loud and clear. Looks like you are ready to start with the presentation, right? Very good. So I'll give you the floor. Over to you, Iris.
¿Escucha bien?
Te escuchamos muy bien.
Sí. Un saludo a todos y felicito al FIDA por el evento. ¿Puede pasar la presentación?
Sí. Un momentito, un ratito.
Sí. Aprovecho para felicitar a las mujeres. Son muchas involucradas con la lucha en defensa de la agroecología y la biodiversidad.
Muy bien. ¿Puedes ver la presentación?
Sí, sí,
Okay.
puede pasar. Pasa.
Ok. Sí, sí, por favor.
Entonces, proyecto de desarrollo productivo y de capacidades, proyecto Paulo Freire, es un acuerdo de préstamo con FIDA en una totalidad de 80 millones de dólares, con objetivo general de la reducción de la pobreza rural en 600 comunidades de la región semiárida del estado de Ceará. La institución ejecutora es la Secretaria de Desarrollo Agrario del Estado, tendo a frente o señor Francisco de Assis Denis, que es secretario de la pasta. El proyecto inició en 2013 y tiene su finalización en 2022. ¿Pasa? En breve descripción del proyecto. Tenemos dos componentes, un componente de desarrollo de capacidad y acceso a agua, que trata de género, generación y pueblos y comunidades tradicionales. La componente de desarrollo productivo y sostenibilidad ambiental, que trata de los proyectos productivos de la agricultura y la artesanía. Tenemos gerencia de monitoreo y evaluación, gerencia de adquisiciones y gerencia administrativo-financiera. ¿Puede pasar? Es un mapa, creo que falta, es Brasil. Estamos neste color verde, es el estado de Ceará, que su ubicación en el nordeste de Brasil. Tenemos 14 pueblos indígenas que viven y que están situados en el estado de Ceará. 17% de total de indígenas del Nordeste se encuentra en nuestro estado de Ceará, sendo actualmente hay 26.071.000 indígenas vivendo en estado do Ceará. Y el estado es el 8º en población indígena del Brasil. ¿Puede pasar? Ah, sí. Entonces, es un mapa mayor con la ubicación de los pueblos indígenas. En especial, estamos a hablar del pueblo Tabajara, que es el pueblo atendido, beneficiado pelo proyecto Paulo Freire. En cuadro al lado tiene todas las etnias que están en el estado. Puede pasar, por favor. Puede pasar. Tiene Pueblo Tabajara, no município de Quiterianópolis, que é município do estado do Ceará. Tem a população diretamente beneficiada. É Tabajara, Aldeia Fidelis, Croatá e Bom Jesus. São 90 famílias, que significa 360 beneficiários. Estamos atendendo 1,38% da população indígena do Ceará. São mulheres jovens que fazem a suma de 60% dos beneficiários. As três comunidades estão ubicadas no território do Sertão do Inhamuns, na região semiárida do Ceará, que, segundo estudos, seguem avançado processo de desertificação. As famílias são monitoreadas e recebem serviço de assessoria técnica, através de entidades organizadas da sociedade civil, com base na transição agroecológica. O ativo são quase pouco mais de meio milhão de invenções produtivas para a instalação de pátio produtivo, aviário galineiro, sim, aprisco, que é coral, entre tecnologias sociais como biodigestor, reutilização de água, acesso à água, cisterna para consumo humano e escola. Também seguridade alimentar e nutricional, libretas agroecológicas, feria agroecológica e solidária, e tem uma sede de la escuela indígena. Pode passar, por favor? Quanto pode passar? Não, por favor. Antes. Agroecologia e conservação da biodiversidade. Utilizamos metodologias participativas, que são importantes em todo o processo de construção comunitária junto às famílias, principalmente por conta de trabalho muito de base, que base na transição ecológica, que é realizar com a realização da assistência técnica, educação contextualizada, círculo de cultura, generação de intercâmbio de conhecimentos, construção coletiva de atividades e ruta de conversação. Pode passar, por favor? traigo quanto práticas agrícolas, consumo familiar de alimentos e venda de produtos, traigo uma mirada panorâmica antes do projeto e depois do projeto. E antes do projeto, havia uso rudimentário de práticas agrícolas e ganadeiras, desconhecimento de los manejos necessários com rebanhos, sem estruturas adequadas para criar e cuidar os rebanhos. Lo que se produzia era direcionado para o consumo das famílias da aldeia. Depois do projeto, houve resgate cultural de conhecimento, a difusão do conhecimento, capacitações, intercâmbios, dias de campo, participação da rede territorial de agroecologia junto às famílias indígenas.
Iris, discúlpame, 2 minutos más, por favor.
Sí, sí. Puede pasar.
Gracias.
La próxima. Entonces, también la dificultad antes del proyecto de acceso a las políticas públicas y también había una desorganización y fragilización. Con el proyecto hubo todo un trabajo de fortalecimento de las organizaciones de las familias, que fortaleció el proceso de la solicitud de proceso de demarcación territorial junto a la Fundación Nacional, a FUNAI, que é um órgão federal responsável pelas políticas de regularização dos pueblos indígenas em Brasil. A comunidade possui uma liderança, uma mulher, que é coordenadora pedagógica da escola indígena que está sediada na comunidade Tabajara e de las demás del entorno, assim como também uma indígena, uma liderança indígena também ocupa e trabalha na saúde coletiva, fazendo todo um acompanhamento em las comunidades indígenas no trabalho de vigilância popular e saúde coletiva. Por favor, pode passar.
Muito bem.
Sim, temos
terminado?
Pouquinho só. Temos problemas claves sobre a fome no mundo, que nos diz que padece de hambre no mundo ao redor de 400 milhões. 50% das pessoas são agricultores. Há uma realidade muito triste, algo para que possamos pensar. Por favor, pode passar. Agroecologia e biodiversidade são as lições aprendidas, está aí, para que possam a mirar todo o conteúdo de discussões, de la construção coletiva que temos realizado junto às comunidades. Pode passar. E as propostas vendo o papel de FIDA, seu compromisso com a agroecologia, com a biodiversidade, a importância de manter as diretrizes políticas prioritárias para combater a pobreza, a extrema pobreza, da importância de seguir em destaque os objetivos de desenvolvimento sustentável da ODS defendidos por la ONU, promover os processos de formações com gestores, instituições associadas sobre desenvolvimento sustentável, seguridade alimentar e nutricional, pueblos e comunidades tradicionais. É a importância de se pensar num observatório da vida ecológica, agroecologia, biodiversidade, com ênfase em temas climáticos, fenômenos da natureza e fatores exógenos que ameaçam a vida e a saúde do ecossistema planetário. Pode passar que estou a encerrar. Próxima, por favor.
Muchas gracias, Iris. Muchas gracias. Obrigado.
Graças, agradeço.
Very good. Now, I will not make a summary of your very interesting presentation, which has provided another concrete case about how agroecology and protection of biodiversity can effectively take place. We are running out of time. Let's check. We are keen to see whether Abera now is ready to speak and we can listen to him better. Abera, do you want to take the floor? Are you ready? We know you are connected.
Thank you, Mr. Hear me now?
We can hear you very, very softly. Can you increase the volume, perhaps?
Thank you so much.
Okay, there is one more suggestion from our technician, just in case you have other devices connected to the same Wi-Fi.
Good morning, afternoon, good evening for all the participants.
Abera, sorry. Do you know if there are other devices connected on the same Wi-Fi? Perhaps you are using a phone, but other people are using and connected on the same Wi-Fi. If so, you should invite them to switch them off. And then once again, reluctantly, we move to the next speaker and we will come back to you. Sorry for that, but time is running and we really hope we will have another try in any case, okay? So next speaker is George from the Philippines, George Austodilo, who is... Okay, Abera, we will talk to you later. We will call you later again. So let me give the floor to George, who is the coordinator of another IFAD-funded project, CHARM. CHARM is located in the Northern Cordillera. It's a project that allows IFAD to be present in that region for a number of years. And I'm sure his presentation will be another interesting case study for all of us. So over to you, George. Please. Again, if you can stick to 10 minutes maximum. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening here in the Philippines. I'm sharing with you the overall view of the scaling up of the Second Cordillera Highland Agricultural Resource Management Project, which is being funded by the IFAD. Its main aim is to reduce poverty and improve livelihood of poor rural women and men in the indigenous communities in the highland areas of the Cordillera Administrative Region here in the Philippines. And its project goal is to increase household income and improve land tenure security, food security, and watershed conservation. As a support, this project has established 5 components, which is the social mobilization participatory investment planning and land titling, which is to organize and assist the organizations to implement the project. The second component is the agroforestry and watershed management project, which I will be focusing by and by to assist in the implementation of agroforestry. The third is the agriculture, agribusiness, and income generating activities, which is connected to the marketing aspect of the project, and the rural infrastructure development component, which is to develop farm to market roads and access on agricultural access. And last is the project management coordination, which composes the staff to assist in these different components. As a project intervention, we were able to organize 18 agroforestry people's organization and 25 livelihood interest groups under the SMPIP component 1. And on the agroforestry aspect, we were able to develop 288 hectares of agroforestry plots, which were planted with assorted fruit trees such as lanzones, rambutan, citrus, and coffee. We were able also to organize 25 livelihood interest groups, which were given seed capital to consolidate the farm produce. And on the infrastructure aspect, we were able to construct and enhance 35 farm to market roads, 14 footpaths, 5 footbridges, 14 communal irrigation systems, and 5 domestic systems, including 11 multi-drying pavements and warehouses. Take note that these sub-projects were identified by the community beneficiaries through a participatory approach. And in addition, these implemented sub-projects were complementary to each other. I will now focus on my case study on agroecology-based project in Barangay Balugan. Barangay Balugan is one of the 18 scale-up barangays and one of the barangays of Sagada, 19 barangays of Sagada in Mountain Province. Although Barangay Balugan is considered as an agricultural barangay prior to the entry of the project, since Barangay Balugan has a total land area of 871.23 hectares with 860 population distributed in 172 households. And from that total land area, it has an agricultural land of 168 hectares. As project interventions of the project, they charm scaling up, they charm to one agroforestry organization and one livelihood interest group were organized. And on the agricultural aspect, 15 hectares were developed as agroforestry plots and were planted with citrus and rambutan. Also, one livelihood group was provided with seed capital to consolidate the farm products in the community. And in the infrastructure aspect, we have improved 6.3 kilometers of farm to market roads. So prior to the entry of the project, we have these main markets, which is the Poblacion Sagada, which is a tourist area, a Bontoc public market, and Baguio City. The Sagada public market is 30 to 45 minutes hiking. This is a rugged road, while Bontoc public market is about 1 hour 30 minutes, utilizing a public utility jeepney. While in Baguio City, we need to travel 6 to 7 hours riding on a bus.
Yeah, sorry, George, there are 3 more minutes for you.
Okay.
Sorry to speed you up.
This is the synergy of the project, the farm to market road, the agroforestry, and the public market. I'm going to present to you some of the good sides or the interventions related to the success of the project. In dealing with the indigenous peoples of the Cordillera, we need to cope up with their culture and traditions. One which we adopted is the Green Covenant signing. As locally known in the Cordillera, the Green Covenant is Zapata, wherein it is an indigenous way of performing a pledge or commitment invoking the assistance of our ancestor gods, and the need to survive rituals will be done stating their obligations. If they fail in the project, it is a sort of an oath, commitment by the community-driven indigenous systems, binding an illegal contract. So it's more than a contract. So here are some of the pictures of the activities conducted. The Farmers Field School, which is the first part of the agroforestry system, wherein the people's organizations are being taught how to do land preparation. Even in the land preparation, traditional practices were also practiced. So the Ogbo or the Bayanihan was practiced, and it also strengthened the harmony of the people's organization. So here are some of the pictures of our accomplishments. It used to be these areas were grassland, or what we call the Uma or Sweden farm, and we introduced agroforestry on these sites. Used to be garden, purely planted with cash crops. We introduced the intercropping of these fruit trees. These were the Oma or the far gardens, which were used to be planted only with cowpeas or corn, but now they were planted with fruit trees. Even the small area within the household, or what we call the baangan or the backyard in English, were planted with grafted fruit trees. As a result, the combination of cash crop, the intercropping, we now see that it has a potential on our economic aspect. One of our good practices is the utilization of these traditional or friendly environmental usage of these these are inventions of our farmers. Although plastic is not being advised, in some areas, the dextrose watering, we use bamboo. And as a result, this is how happy a family could be if during harvest season.
Very good.
And as in connection to the other component, the livelihood group networking and linkaging is being done, when the products were being sold by these organized livelihood interest groups. The lessons learned in the implementation of this project is that in dealing with the indigenous community, we need to adapt to their culture and tradition. We uh, we utilize the traditional practices such as the green covenant or the sapata, and not introducing total change on their farming aspect. Instead, enhance the existing farming aspect, like the enhancement of the umaing di baangan. This has a tool in the success of the project. For our recommendation, the DA Charm has facilitated the formulation of this integrated watershed management plan, the Sikami Kamaningal Mangmang integrated watershed plan, which has an area of 79,496 hectares, and of this area, it has 44,605 hectares of agricultural land, which is situated in the 2 provinces and 5 barangays. This is the source of water for the lowland areas, the Ilocos and the Cagayan areas, and we proposed and we had submitted this to IFAD.
Very good.
IFAD, and I hope they will continue assisting the project since.
Okay. Thank you, George. Thank you. With this recommendation, I think we can complete the presentation. And again, sorry if my job is about time management, but we are really keen to give another chance to Abera. But thanks again. I think in your conclusion, one of your closing remarks is the fact that when dealing with indigenous people, we need to be able to adopt their culture and their practices. By the way, I saw in the chat that the insect trap practice has received a lot of attention, is something that we need to do. And when we work in government framework with many actors involved, many implementing agencies, this capacity to adopt the indigenous knowledge and culture is something we have to work on. Very good. Thank you again. Abera, are you with us? I know you are with us. Let's see whether we can hear you.
I hope can be heard now. I think you hear me now.
Yeah, better than before. Let's see. Keep going. Keep going. Please continue.
Yeah, and
no.
So sorry for no. Sorry for the situation. Activity.
Okay, Abera, no worries. We try. I think good news for you is that we managed to get some additional time. We will stop going live in 5 minutes, but the interpreters will continue, and you can remain connected to continue an informal conversation. Now, just to stick to the time of the agenda, let me come to some closing remarks. By the way, the fact that we had some technical difficulties, also Tuntiak, you might have noticed, he was in the program and we received a message that he was not able to connect. I hope that this issue can at least provoke some sympathy to the fact that despite all these challenges, we wanted to have a global meeting on the Indigenous Peoples Forum with 150 representatives from indigenous peoples from all the regions. We didn't want to give up despite the potential connectivity issues that we experience even today. But it's okay. After all, it's our task, in fact, it's our duty to take these challenges up. So even if we were not able to collect the testimony and the experience from Abera and Tuntiak, I would say as a simple closing remark that this this event was very interesting. We had enough meat, enough food for thought in order to believe once more that we need there is potential to do more on two issues which are extremely important. If we talk about sustainable development goals, if we talk about the Agenda 2030, if we talk about food systems, we know that there are some serious issues related to sustainability of the current practices. Indigenous peoples with their own knowledge and practices have a lot to say. As long as the current food systems is doped with externalities which are not factored in, then probably we will not find a solution. But if we're able to acknowledge that the conservation of biodiversity and the practices of agroecology can provide a solution, looking at the experiences that are already there, then I think the work of IFAD, all UN agencies, all development partners, all government can really have an impact in terms of food security, food sovereignty, and reduction of poverty. Again, please continue the conversation. I want to thank my colleagues. Mena is going to lead the discussion. Mena, I didn't have a chance to introduce her, and I'm sorry, Mena, but Mena is our junior professional officer working on agroecology issues in our division, and she did a lot of preparatory work together with Doina and Enrique and René, and of course my staff. And so again, coming to a closing of this event, I wish you all the best and let's keep working. We need to work hard. Over to you. Goodbye.